y'all, and welcome to Trials to Triumphs. I'm Ashley Blaine Featherson-Jenkins, but you can call me ABFJ. This week, my new friend, author of the New York Times best-selling memoir, Somebody's Daughter, Ashley C. Ford, talks to me about vulnerability and the miracle of grace. Mother-daughter relationships are so beautiful, but sometimes they can be really complicated. In her book, Ashley wrote about the challenges she experienced with her mom when her father went to prison. But in our conversation, she reminded me that even in those difficult moments, there is still grace.
The miracle of grace is that you can give what you've never been given. I think that that's what a lot of our moms are missing, is the grace that they could not find for themselves. They have a lot of trouble finding for us. But when we do find that grace for ourselves, we experience the miracle.
Hi, Ashley.
Hello. Hi, Ashley.
Welcome to Trials to Triumphs, Ashley. I am so excited to chat with you. You know, we haven't met in person, but I've met you through your words. And I think you are just a fabulous human being, a deeply intentional writer, and someone who has a lot to say for our generation, and that we all have an incredible amount to learn from. So I'm really excited to chat with you and get to know you better, Ashley.
Thank you so much for thinking so well of me. Like, that's really encouraging. Thank you.
Of course.
I appreciate that.
We're going to start, Ashley, with some icebreaker questions. Okay.
I love those.
All right. Me too. Okay. So what sounds or smells remind you of your loved ones?
The smell of liquid foundation reminds me a lot of my grandmother. She's really the only person who I have memories of holding me and holding me close and hugging me close in that way. And she always had on her fashion fair.
Okay, my second question for you is, what is something recently or a long time ago that someone did for you that meant a lot to you? And that when you think about it in this moment, you're like, ooh, I really needed that. I really appreciated that.
This is very recent.
Okay.
But not too long ago, I was just having a hard day emotionally, and there wasn't really a lot going on in my circumstances that would have led to me being like, this is the reason I'm having a bad day. It was this feeling, right? And I was down and I was feeling overwhelmed by even small things, irritated to the point of just like not liking how my clothes feel on my skin, not liking the sound level of the world. Nothing I think of to eat sounds good because it's like my brain won't show me what I want next almost. And I can't get comfortable. And my husband noticed and he asked me if there was anything he could do. And I told him, I don't know what it is. I wish I could tell you something, but I can't even figure it out for myself right now. And while I was having some time to just like be in the quiet and try to like center myself and figure out what I wanted, he washed and dried my favorite pajamas and brought them to me and said, you usually feel a lot better when you're wearing these. So maybe just put on these pajamas. And they really were like my favorite pajamas. And to be honest, I had been thinking all day, like, I wish those pajamas were clean. But our dryer had broken and the new dryer had just gotten there. So like they weren't clean. And I was like, I just want to put on my pajamas and be able to like be in my body and do what I need to do. And he brought me those pajamas and I just like, I literally cried. And
Mm.
that was unexpected, you know, for me especially. And it's not unexpected that my husband does kind things for me. He does kind things for me all the time, but it was just so specific, and it was exactly what I needed in that moment. And I think when you have those moments of connection with another person, it's beautiful, but it's also like this bittersweetness inside of like, oh my God, I can't believe anybody's paying attention to me this much. Like, I can't believe anybody
Mm.
loves me this much, you know? And yeah, it's just one of those things that remind you not only that you have that kind of love, but also that like you're worthy of it, and you've been worthy of it the whole time.
Yeah, wow. Okay, that story took me out. Shout out to your husband. We love him. He's an amazing man. May God continue to bless him for all of his days. Um, truly, because I'm like, oh my God, I love this story.
Yeah.
But it makes me think too that we also have to remember that you get what you give.
Yes.
It was so easy for him to do that for you because I'm sure that you show up for him in similar ways all the time.
I definitely try
And
to.
yeah, and the love, not always, but I think oftentimes the love, and I say not always because I do think that there are people who are still treated very poorly and they are good people
Hmm.
and they give
Yes.
great love and they show up for people and they do not always get that in return.
Mm.
But still, oftentimes, the love that you put out comes back to you. Um,
Yes.
and in ways that you need, especially when you're not able to do it for yourself sometimes. Like those days are so, just you talking about that day, it made me like itchy or something. Like it made me
Yeah.
just think about days that I've had like that. Those days that just feel like, why am I moping around? Like you said,
Right.
why aren't my feet coming up off the ground? Why
Right.
is my posture different? Why did it take me an extra hour to get out of bed? And I think what we have to learn to understand about ourselves is that we are affected by everything.
Everything.
Indirectly, directly, but we're affected by things.
Yes.
And sometimes we have all the words to talk about what we're affected by, and other times we don't. And both are okay. I think I know for myself, I put a lot of pressure on myself sometimes to like
Yeah.
always be able to access my emotions and explain what they are and be able to effectively communicate it to other people. And, take my space, take adequate space when I need it. And like, that's a very logical way of thinking about it, but it's not always that easy, and life be life in.
Yeah.
And
And we're
sometimes you just need the
humans.
pajamas. Like,
We're human beings. There's no
yeah.
such thing as I think that one of the things that we get caught up in frequently, and a source of a lot of suffering for people, and it definitely been a source of a lot of suffering for me, is this belief that anything I believe in or anything I believe in is true, I should be able to live by with perfection. I should be able to
Mm,
live by flawlessly. I should be able to, because I believe it's true, because I believe I deserve something, because I believe that I am worthy of something, because I believe that I want something, that nothing, nothing about my choices should ever get me away from those things. Nothing should ever hinder me in my journey towards those things. But that's not reality. We are human beings. We are by creation imperfect. We
mm,
must be. So seeking perfection in that way is not just, fruitless because it can never be. It's also a self-induced suffering. Even though we're
yeah.
taught it, it's something that we learn. We see other people live that way. We watch other people live that way. And we decide, in not so much decide as much as like it's in so many ways the path of least resistance,
Hmm.
um, to live our lives by those same rules. And I don't know. I mean, when I was a kid, there was something about looking around at the adults around me and being like, okay, I know that these people tell me what to do a lot, but none of them seem happy. None of them seem
Woo!
happy. So should I be doing exactly what they tell me? It's having that sense of self, that idea that, some things are outside of your choice, but there are so many things within your choice if you're honest with yourself about what you see around you.
Yeah. Wow. You also, and I want to talk about your beginnings, but
Hmm.
what you just said tells me that you've always had um, an acute sense of awareness. You've always been aware of what's going on.
For longer than I wanted to be.
Yeah,
For sure.
yeah.
I think that's the thing, is that it felt a lot of my self-awareness, and the fact that it starts at a young age is a matter of what felt like the necessary skills for survival for
Mm,
me. I deeply, deeply felt like, in so many ways from a very young age, that I only had myself to count on, and that I was going to have to be the one to save me. That was a really very early lesson. And I think certain things just come online a little earlier when you're faced with survival and you don't have the buffer of a parent who you trust to protect you. I think
mhm.
that buffer allows a little more time for those skills to sort of like lay dormant and allow you the sort of like bliss and innocence of early childhood, or what should be the bliss and innocence of early childhood.
Yeah.
But if your body and your mind suspect that no, you need to learn how to read fast. You need to
Hmm.
learn how to communicate with your words quickly. You need to
Yeah.
learn, I think it might speed those things up or allow you access to them earlier. I'm not a doctor or a neurophysicist. Please don't quote me on that.
Yeah. No, no, because I because as you're saying this, I'm just thinking uh about all of the ways that experiences like yours could affect your nervous system
Oh yeah.
for your entire life. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, and having to do the work of constantly undoing,
Oh yeah.
and unlearning things that aren't a part of your current and present existence.
Yeah.
With the husband that washed your pajamas and said, put the pajamas on.
Who loves you, who cares for you, who wants to know you forever, who wants to know everything about you, who wants to know who you are.
Yeah.
And it's amazing, right? Like he's so amazing, and it's wild how much he has sort of had to help me process or deal with the remnants of a life that we did not lead together, that he
Mm.
was not part of, that he had no opportunity to disrupt or insert himself in. And part of
Yeah.
what he has to deal with sometimes in therapy is that he can't.
Hmm.
He can't heal what was wounded for me.
Yeah.
And he has had to come to terms with the fact that, like, I can be a person who is beside her on her journey of healing, which everybody is hopefully on at some point in their life. Um, but I am not and cannot be the source of that healing.
Yeah.
He's had to like reckon with that. And that's been, one of the more beautiful things about my relationship with him, and with my home and with my marriage, is that, like, I just have a person who, when they realizes that they need to make a shift in order to meet me where I am, does not hesitate to make that shift, and does not hesitate to do that work when they realize
Yeah.
that that's the work that they need to do. And I think
Amen.
that's all kids ever even want from their parents.
I
you
think so
know
too.
they just want you
Yeah.
to try.
I want to go back to the beginning.
Sure.
What did Fort Wayne, Indiana give you?
Oh. Despite the contents of my book, I would like to say that I think Fort Wayne, Indiana gave me a very solid and gentle beginning. I grew up in a place that was sort of a microcosm of some of the biggest issues in the area, but it was also a place that tended to always have reminders that we were a city of people who were kind of doing our best. Like there's nothing about it that would ever have it called significantly special in any way. You know, like we have all the most random lore, like Shelley Long went to high school there, and Heather Headley went to high school there, and Johnny Appleseed is buried there. And no, he's not a myth. He was a real person named John Chapman. You know, we always have like these weird little pieces of lore and things like that, which is really lovely to grow up in because you always get to have the distance with like the media and with representations because nothing's set in Fort Wayne, Indiana. You feel like you're always the audience, you know? And it feels like certain things don't pertain to you as much as they pertain to people outside this place. They take Christmas very seriously. They take Halloween very seriously. There's an art museum and a theater and all of these things. We have a baseball team. There are all these things that would be like, seems like the kind of things a much larger city has. But no, we have it right here and nobody knows about it. And it's just us, right? And that's how it feels for a really long time when you're a kid, or at least when I was a kid. I don't know if you can really have that anymore with how ubiquitous the internet is now. But when I was growing up, it just felt extremely safe. It felt extremely safe. Even when I felt like I was in danger, it did not feel like because this is an unsafe place. I always felt safe in that city.
Ashley, what do you cherish most about your relationship with either of your parents? If you have something. Yeah. Like what can you look at now and say, I actually appreciate that, or I learned this from them and it's helped me become this Ashley today?
I really value how much my mom appreciated laughter. My mother's a very funny person, and our senses of humor are almost exactly alike. So often I hear myself say something or make a joke or whatever where people actually laugh, and it feels like it's not my voice. It's like, oh, I think that was my mom.
Wow.
I sound like her in those moments. She's a very, very charming person. People tend to have a really good time around my mother. So that's definitely the thing I cherish most, probably in my relationship with her. And with my dad, I think the thing I cherish most is both of us having this belief in effort, you know, that like that you'll put effort in the places that are important to you. And you know, my dad is an obviously imperfect person, but my dad tries, you know, with me, with my brother, with our anger, our expressions of that anger, our demand in a lot of cases that if he's going to be in our lives, that he be in our lives in such a specific way. He just tries. He just, okay, that's fine. I love you. You're the most important thing to me. So that's fine. Him being in prison for 30 years, there was only so much he could do, but it felt like he always did as much as he could. And it helps.
You mentioned earlier that you were surviving when you were growing up. What actually were you surviving?
My mom was really sad and did not have anything really to give us in terms of emotional support. And she is a very anxious person. And being an anxious person, and not having a certain amount of support, not being able to give a certain amount of support, meant that there are a lot of things that, made my mom angry or that she couldn't handle. One of those being our emotions. So, this is not, I think, super atypical, but I was definitely raised in a home where I wasn't really allowed to be sad or upset, or anger was definitely not allowed in my mother's house. Basically, you weren't allowed to have those feelings until you had your own house, was like the rule. And that was never said explicitly. That's just what was enforced. I grew up in a home where like I couldn't be a person in my house. Like earlier when I was talking about the pursuit of perfection being, incongruent with the experience of human life. One of the things I think about is the fact that there weren't really mistakes in my house. If you dropped something, if you dropped a glass, if you dropped something that had been in the refrigerator, if you were holding something over the sink and you dropped it and an adult was around, or usually like any adult who felt like they had that sort of like direct authority over you, so my mom or, sometimes my grandmother, it was like, why would you do that? Why weren't you paying enough attention? Why weren't you holding it correctly the way you should? Why weren't you? It was like nothing ever dropped and it just dropped. Like nobody ever tripped and fell and they just tripped and fell. It was like they always had to find a reason why it was actually your fault that it happened, And it was also this weird thing where sometimes I attribute it to that anxiety and to that fear and nervousness, because it almost seemed like they really needed it to be just something like a bad choice.
That's what I was thinking.
That somebody made. Like
when you were saying it,
needed it to be that, because otherwise things just happen. And to believe that is so much scarier than just believing you have a kid on your hand that's just not paying enough attention, know? And you would be less stressed out if the kid would just pay more attention. But that's not what's stressing you out. What's stressing you out is like life and reality of being a parent is that like you're raising a human and you can't get it all right and they can't get it all right. And your job isn't really to punish them for not getting it all right. Your job is to show them what it looks like when you deal with the fact that you can't get it all right. But we don't get that lesson in a lot of cases. Nobody shows us, nobody gives us an example of how to process that feeling, that emotion that will actually be the thing that follows us through our whole lives, guaranteed. You're going to mess up. You're going to make mistakes. And I grew up in a house where that was not allowed. And that'll mess a person up, turns out. I'm much better now.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I think a lot of it's generational. What year was your mom born? What
65.
year was she born? Okay, so your mom's younger than my mom. My mom was born in 1953, but still they're in the same realm. But the vulnerability that you kind of needed from your mother, that she just wasn't able to access. And I've talked to my mom about this on the podcast, actually, about it's been the same for me. Teen Mom is on MTV is one of my favorite shows. It just,
oh my God,
I know
me too.
Really?
Yes.
Ashley, oh my gosh, we are the same. You're the first person to say, literally, I've interviewed a million people. You're the first person to say, me too. It's a perfect example. Mm-hmm. Jade, who's one of the moms on the show, has been dealing with a lot. Her parents are dealing with addiction and all sorts of different things. It's just, she's had her fiance was dealing with addiction. She has a lot on her plate. She has a young daughter who's like 5 or something. It's just a lot. And her parents are finally going to rehab. And she's like so happy about it, but it's making her very anxious. And every time I see her, I'm like, is that what I look like when I'm anxious? Because I see it. It like flushes over her as soon as her parents come into her home. She like becomes more rigid and like isn't as openly expressive. And like you can see she's all in her head. But anyway, her mom came in and she was trying to talk to her mom about like, you know, like, are you ready for this, Mom? Like, I just want to make sure that like, you know, you haven't really done rehab before in the past. I just want to make sure you're really going to do it. Like there's a lot on the line. I got you and Dad into rehab. Like it was hard for me, but I really want this to work. And she's starting to get emotional because it means a lot to her. And she doesn't want it to not work. And she is thinking about, we cannot go back to what it's been. It's too much for me. I can't handle it anymore. And as soon as she starts to get emotional, her mom says, Jade, I can't do this.
Yeah.
And she walks away. And my tears are welling up. And I'm like, oh my, because I know what that feels like. It is the worst feeling in the world when someone you know loves you and that all you want them to do is pull you in, says, I can't deal with this. But what I saw was, which was very healing for me in a lot of ways, was her mother didn't deal with Jade then, which is something I definitely would like for her to work on. But she went into the other room and just was crying. And I think for me with my mom, maybe it was, you know, like this with you, for you with your mom. And I think with Jade and her mom, it's that I just want my mom to do that in the same room with me.
Same.
We can do it together. We don't have to we don't have to go to our own corners and do it. Let's do it. Let's fall apart together. Let's fall into one another. What can come out of that? And that's why shows like Teen Mom, I love them so much. And I really encourage people to watch it because you can't fake it. It's real.
Yeah.
It is so real. They are not actors. You can't act that. Like that is, and it was so important for me to see it because I was like, that's what my mom does. She wants to. She just is working on, it's too many feelings. Whereas she birthed a daughter who I'm carrying all the feelings of generations after generation after generation of women who were holding it in. And now it's just all pouring out of me. And I just want to be able to have it pour out onto my family. It's the same. My dad, sometimes when I get emotional, he starts laughing. He's like, what you doing now? And I'm like, Dad, I'm really sad or I'm really worried about this thing. Like, it's not funny. Like, what?
And it's like, and they never learned how to deal with it, you know? So they don't know really how to show you how to deal with it, which doesn't mean they can't. It means that like they don't have an example. They don't have something to look back to and say, oh, this is how I remember this person doing it for me. You know, Glennon Doyle has this quote. I don't know if it's her quote. She may have said she was quoting somebody else. So I'm sorry, but I read it in her book. But one of the things she said was that the miracle of grace is that you can give what you've never been given. That is the miracle of grace.
Oh my goodness.
You know? And I think that that's what a lot of our moms are missing is the grace that they could not find for themselves. They have a lot of trouble finding for us. But I think that the difference sometimes between us and our mothers is that, like, when we do find that grace for ourselves, we experience the miracle. Like, that is the miracle, is that we are able to give ourselves what we were never given.
Whew.
You know?
Yeah. And I think about my mom a lot, and what I want from her sometimes in the realm of vulnerability, like you were just talking about the grace, like she just didn't have it. But I never thought about
Yes.
that until I was an adult. I was like, she didn't have the person to fall into either. And I
Right.
know there have been so many things in her life that she was looking around saying, who can I fall into? And I just
Absolutely.
hope that when she hears this, that she knows that, like, I want to fall into you, mom. There's
Hmm.
no better arms than the arms of your mother. No arm can compare to the arms of
Right.
your mother. And in the bosom of a mother, like it's a
Right.
special place. And that's why when, going back to the beginning, when you said your memories of being held were with your grandmother,
Yeah.
like, first of all, I'm grateful that you have those memories, but I also know that I'm sure you wish you kind of had those same sort of memories with your mother too.
All the time. When you don't really have that connection with your mom, you don't have that kind of relationship, you don't have that closeness that you really desire with her. It's not to say that you can't have a closeness, or a special relationship and stuff with other people. It's just that it's always bittersweet because there is always
Mm.
part of you that's like, man, it's wild that some people got this from the person who gave birth to them. It's wild that some people know what it's like to feel this way about the person who gave birth to them. It's wild.
Hmm.
What has been wild to me for most of my life and continues to be wild to me into my mid 30s is that people reach out to their mothers for comfort. I know that it happens. I've seen it happen. I've watched it happen. It's a beautiful thing to see, like, somebody
Yes.
go, I need to call my mom, like, I need my mom.
Yes.
And to be like, wow, what is that like? Like, what's it like to feel like you're in trouble or to feel like you need someone to hold on to or someone to hold on to you? And your first thought is, I need to call my mom. I wanted that. I
Yeah.
wished for that. I
Hmm.
hoped that that would become my life over and over again. I had a whole fantasy of how I would give myself over to that at some point, how, I would want to remain open to that all the time. Like, I held on to that fantasy until it started to hurt me. Like, I held on to
Mm.
it for as long as I possibly could. I wouldn't even say when it started to hurt me. I held on to that fantasy until I had to choose between it or me. I was trying to finish the book. Um, I was in a lot of emotional distress
Hmm.
for some time. And I had a really fantastic therapist, and he suggested that I go to a place where you go through some pretty intensive therapy and
Hmm.
you're separated in a lot of ways from the rest of the world while you're there, including your normal support systems, your spouses, your friends, like you're really there on your own, like sent out to sea and with people who you hopefully trust. And you're going to unearth some stuff. You're going to figure some things out about you and what you really want and what you're really afraid of and what you're
Hmm.
really trying to do with your life. And I went to that place. I think that's where I sort of had the realization um while working through some of my memories, some of my insecurities, a lot of things while working through those things in a group. Um, it was suggested to me that I was still hoping to be a 14-year-old who was close to her mom,
Hmm.
except I was 33. you know? And I was thinking about that and I was like, oh my God, I guess there is part of me that is holding on to this idea that like, I don't want to tell the truth or I don't want to say what's real in case it destroys an opportunity for me and her to become this thing that we can actually never be. I am never going to be a child who finds comfort in her mother. Like that's already passed. I don't get that back. And because I don't get that, my pursuit of that fantasy, by way of holding myself back is not only, going to end up being fruitless ultimately, but is also harming me because not being able to be honest about who I am and what I've been through, is coming out in other ways. It's not just something that I've been able to contain to this one area. It is something that is spilling out into other parts of my life and in some cases kind of poisoning them. I didn't want that anymore. So I didn't know that this was going to fix it, you know, or if it could fix it. And I don't know that I'm fixed now, but I knew that I had tried all the other stuff that sounded easier. Ditto. None of them worked. So I had to do something else.
Yeah, and I think it's about accepting the mothers, the fathers, the sisters, the brothers that we do have. Yes. And hoping that they can do the same with us, right?
Yes.
Like you said, like maybe your mom isn't someone you can run to for comfort. She's going to make you laugh.
For sure.
And there's a lot of people who have moms that are there for comfort, but don't bring them that type of joy.
Right.
And it's about, you know, sometimes you have to barter with yourself. Like maybe when you were a child, you needed a lot of that comfort, right? You didn't get it.
Right.
But now you have a husband who washes your pajamas.
I sure do.
So you don't need that in the same way. I just got chills. You don't need that in the same way. You know, that was that you know, that was restored in a different way by another person that was a gift to you, right? Yes. And so we can now seek something else, right? From our mothers or from our fathers or from our sisters or our brothers. So that really spoke to me because it allows you to have acceptance, but also it encourages you to discover. There's so many other amazing things that about my mom that maybe it's not the vulnerability, but there's so many other great things that I'm like, thank God I have this. Oh my God, my mom's the freaking best. You know what I mean? Like this is great. And some of the things that she's not able to give me because she wasn't given it and because it's something that she's still learning at almost 70 years old, God has placed other people in my life that can kind of do that and vice versa for her, you know? So same. I'm really grateful for that. What's your favorite thing about yourself today?
My favorite thing about myself today is my ability to have honest communication with myself now about what I do and don't want. I don't always know the answers to those questions immediately, but that doesn't make me mad anymore. I just lean into the curiosity and decide that it might be worth putting in the work to find the answer out instead of shaming myself for not being certain before I have all the information.
That's good. That's
really
growth.
good about that.
That's growth. Yeah.
Real growth.
Yeah. Ooh. Okay. So Ashley, what has been your takeaway from our conversation today?
I think my takeaway from our conversation today is that while not all 80s Ashleys are the same, you and I are definitely on the same wavelength. And I like and appreciate that. And it definitely encourages me to be a lot more open than I usually am. And I like that. I like that.
I'm getting emotional. I am. This is all the tears of my childhood start to come out. No,
that's all right.
I'm getting emotional because that's basically my takeaway. Like, my takeaway is that on today, I needed someone that was like me. Like, I needed to feel the comfort of someone that starts off as a stranger, but in the matter of an hour becomes a friend. Like, I needed the reminder of how God is always conspiring on my behalf in that way, and that it's lovely and it's inspiring and it's moving, that I can have a conversation with someone and it feels, in a lot of ways, although we have very different lives, very different upbringings, I still feel in some ways like I'm looking into the mirror, and we have the same name. Like, it's
a beautiful
even thing. Just some beautiful chocolate women with the same name talking about the stuff they've been through. Like, that. This conversation, to me, another one of my takeaways is that it's a big reminder why I wanted to do this. This is the epitome of trials to triumphs. This is the goal of every conversation. What I'm feeling right now, I have no doubt that everyone listening will feel and will be more open to when magic moments like this happen in their life. So thank you, Ashley. We are friends. I'm just telling you now, we're friends. We're keeping in touch. Yeah, we're in. We're tapped in. It's fine. And I'm very excited about it. And I learned so much from you today. So I honor you. I love you. And I thank you. I really, really do. Ashley, this was a gift. It was a gift.
Thank you for your time and for your extremely thoughtful questions that let me go to places I don't often get to go and express things that I don't often get to express, but that make me feel a lot more seen, connected, and free. I really appreciate that.
Oh, anytime, girl. Thank you for listening. This podcast is produced by LWC Studios for OWN. The show's executive producer is Juleka Lantigua. Our managing producers are Fatima El-Swifi and Paulina Velasco. Shanice Tyndall is our lead producer. Associate producer is Mona Hassan. Jordan Thompson is our marketing coordinator. This episode was mixed by Trin Lightburn. Michelle Baker is our video editor. If you enjoyed listening to this episode, and we hope you did, please make sure to subscribe, leave a rating, and review wherever you listen to your podcast to ensure you hear the next one.